I do need to. You know, when it's parking, man, the road time's pretty much hard.
I know I did.
My phone has a ton of texts. Watch me. But I mean, it's not good. They're just inflammatory. I mean, I'm glad. They do distribute that.
Anyway, how about a hand?
Luckily, I was
Oh, it was windy.
Oh, when you know, it's like, on this side, like, one building over.
I'm going to sit over here out of the line of the...
Okay.
I'm not, I'm in yeah, we're a, Graham? Yes.
Yeah, it's up there on the ceiling.
Okay. It's a good thing I didn't go to the city council to hear about it. Please call me. Is that your yeah, we got it. It looks like it's
So you get more swag this summer? Oh, good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
they were about.
I think we got some real notice. I think we, you know, yes.
So we got Mike's signature on 15 tomorrow. He wrote a letter to himself when he was 14, and we just got it out today. So he sent a letter to his 18th self. So a letter to himself when he was 14. And one of the first things he said, I'm going to turn 18 up to
Well, you know, the environment was going
And he also said that his friends, I saw him on Mother's Day, and he said that his friends that were at the 2 years ago are now very excited to let people go to that matters.
I watched part of it with Austin. But I kind of didn't have that much patience. Really? That's cool. I might have to try to see this. There hasn't been much that I wanted to see since the Oscar season. They're like, nothing more.
Are you surprised? No, I mean,
I'm glad we got to and then we can I'm sure that's
Can you try it out?
too far away.
Yeah, I realize that it's a little far away. I'm trying to move my laptop. But if you're having trouble, you can just say next slide or something.
Now, if I sit there, am I going to block you?
You're not going to block me.
No, I'm not going to block you. There's a price. There's a price to sit here.
You might get a bop on the head.
We're going to start in a few minutes, so if you want to grab a bite, do it right now. It's on the side. There's some lovely hummus and stuff out there.
make sure nothing else is shown.
Give it maybe 5 minutes. Yes, but you still people, I mean, don't close the door.
Your thing is on.
If it's red, it's off. Thank you. Go hide this somewhere. Is that Cedar Falls?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I can't. Greetings, thank you.
I know this place.
Heading down
And I got a friendly person I can look at. Any problem.
Mayor, would you like a seat?
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to this Missing Middle event. This event is part of Silicon Valley at Home's Affordable Housing Week. I think this has been happening for how many years? Affordable Housing Week around May for 20, 30 years. It's a wonderful time that we help educate the community about what the issues are around housing. This event, well, first of all, I want to thank Morrison Foster for letting us use the space. It was very generous of them. And the event is sponsored by Silicon Valley at Home, Palo Alto Forward, Bay Area Forward, and the League of Women Voters, which is, I represent the League. And the League, you probably know, from especially this time of year, we educate voters about candidates and ballot measures and, register voters and tell you, everything you need to know about the voting process. But the other thing the League does is advocate, and we advocate on issues that are important to us. And locally, what we've been advocating for many, many years is housing, which is why we're happy to be a part of this event. First, I'd like to introduce Mayor Liz Nitz, who will say a few words. Now, Liz just told me that she first entered into the public service by being elected to the Palo Alto School Board, and then 5 different times elected to Palo Alto City Council, 3 different times as a supervisor for Santa Clara County. And Liz is our champion for housing, and we're so glad she's mayor this year. And this is the time we really need her championship. So Liz, thank you.
I think we should see it too. This is live.
Let's try that. Okay, is that better? I am Liz Nitz, and I am the mayor, and it's absolutely a delight to be here. I would like to just call out a couple of people before I say a real welcome. My colleague Adrian Fine is here, right down there, sits on the council with me. Behind him is Gail Price, who sat on the council with me. And I'm looking to see if anyone else here is in elected office or you serve on something. We'd like to recognize you. Anybody else? Okay. Not terribly loud. Can you hear me? Yes. So in saying my welcome, let me ask a couple of questions. How many of you live in Palo Alto? How many of you own a house in Palo Alto? Fewer number. How many of you live outside of Palo Alto? Oh, that's a great showing. That's terrific. So I am extremely enthused about not only affordable housing, but also the missing middle. And the reason is this. I think we've become a less and less diverse community, especially economically. And I am very worried that eventually, and we may be there now, we will not have people who do pretty everyday jobs live in our community anymore. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're an office worker of some kind, whatever it may be, the chances are very good you don't own anything unless, or you don't own anything of recent vintage, unless you were able to save up a lot of money a long time ago, you had rich parents, or you happened to strike it rich in a startup. It is very difficult now to buy in Palo Alto. With Palo Alto's average house running $3 million, if you were going to put 20% down on that, that's $600,000. How many of us in this room have $600,000 just sitting in their bank account? If you could find a house to begin with, because you'll have to bid against any number of other people. So it's very tough. So I'm a big advocate for building more housing, building housing near transit, you know, all the obvious things that we're not doing in Palo Alto right now. And that's very sad for me. We have recently passed what we call an overlay for affordable housing, just waiting for that first project to come along. And I'm hoping that happens soon. So it's wonderful to see all of you here tonight. A great pleasure, and I'm going to head back there and listen to every word you say and find out how we can fill that missing middle. So thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm going to explain what we'll be doing tonight. We have 5 excellent panelists who are really experts in the area that they'll be talking about. They will each speak for 10 minutes, and I'll introduce each panelist and tell you something about them when it's their turn to speak. And when they're all done, then we'll open it up to questions for the audience. So first, I'll tell you the order in which they'll speak. It'll be Steve Levy, Sarah Chafin, Denise Pinkston, Lisa Ratner, and Elaine Wang, in that order. So starting from my left, Steve Levy. So Steve is an economist. He serves on the board of Palo Alto Forward and Bay Area Forward, and he's a member of the kitchen cabinet at SV at Home. I'm not sure what the kitchen cabinet is. He is chair of our leagues, our local leagues, Housing and Transportation Committee, and he serves on a housing committee that's part of the county league. There's a group of the 5 leagues of Santa Clara County, and it has a housing committee. Steve has been the director of the Center for the Continuing Study of the California Economy for years and years, and where he analyzes regional growth trends and related policy issues for large public agencies in California. So Steve, tell us, who are the missing middle, and why are events like this important?
So, first of all, can you hear me?
It helps if you stand up.
No,
No, it doesn't.
no, there's a mic low. Oh.
The green button's not on.
It is.
Okay.
So is this better? Okay. There are 2 kinds of housing that are being built now. Almost everything fits into either nonprofit developers building subsidized or below market rate housing, primarily for people who make less than 60 or 80% of the middle income. We're having a little progress, as Liz said. We've opened the gates in Palo Alto, and in the San Jose Mercury News today, there was a 300+ unit project proposed for near the Diridon Transit Station. We're way, way behind, but there's a little bit of good news there. The second kind is market rate housing, which for most people now is very, very expensive. We're building more of that now because the rents and the prices allow developers, as Denise will tell you, to build that so more supply is coming online. There's a little silver lining. There are projects like on the Google land in North Bay Shore, where Mountain View and Google have come together and agreed to build 10,000 homes, of which I think 2,000 will be set aside for low and moderate income folks. So that's one of the ways to get some housing for the middle as part of these negotiated agreements on large plots of land. You will notice for whom housing is not being built. It's not being built for folks in the middle, either because the subsidy programs that they are technically eligible for, all that money goes to lower income folks, which may be right, and they stand on waiting lists, or they really are people in the middle, as Sarah will give you some example. Not poor enough to qualify for the subsidized housing, there's not enough of, not affluent enough to pay for the market. So there are people who are missing, but there's also types of housing that are missing that Lisa and Elaine and Denise will talk to you about. And there are two main reasons why those types of housing aren't being built. One, it's very, very expensive, and unless we can find a way to lower the cost, which they'll talk about, builders can't build stuff that's affordable to middle-class people. And this panel is housing that's affordable to middle-class people, so we're going to try and delve into that. And the second piece of that is a whole bunch of regulations that makes the type of housing that could be affordable not welcomed by cities. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to put a human face. Sarah and I have, well, Sarah has invited me to be on a number of panels for support teacher housing. She'll tell you about that, but I want to leave you with two things. One, in this valley, the organization that really means housing for all is Silicon Valley at Home. And so will the staff who are here from Silicon Valley at Home just stand up so that people here will know who you are? And the second thing is that the one thing that resonated when Sarah and I and others did the teacher housing panel was the teachers knew they had to find allies, people like them who were missing in the middle. So it wasn't just about teachers, it was about them as an example of a whole class of people. So this is going to be a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. Great introduction. I wonder how many people here are teachers? Oh, well. We've all been taught by teachers, however. Okay, Sarah Chafin has over 15 years of experience in real estate finance, including land use and commercial and residential real estate. Sarah founded Support Teacher Housing, and you can go to its website, supportteacherhousing.org, and is an expert on nonprofit housing using alternative financial and construction models. Sarah works with a vast network of community advisors and the public and private sector, and she's a board member of Bay Area Forward. Sarah, tell us what you have learned in listening to teachers and school administrators and how this is applicable to others in the missing middle.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I actually have a deep voice, so hopefully you can hear me. But basically, I've been working on a grassroots level with teachers, so I think it's really important to understand the housing crisis and the crisis for the missing middle from sort of a personal standpoint. And I've been working very closely with different good groups like Palo Alto Forward, Bay Area Forward, and various advocates. We've been convening teacher town halls where the teachers get together and they share their stories regarding the housing crisis. So some of the stories, which are pretty common, one of the teachers that I met with talked about the fact that the third week of the month, she doesn't actually have enough money for food, okay? Another teacher in Los Altos shared she has a son who's a high school student, and she'd like him to be able to have his own room. So she's actually a full-time teacher at Los Altos High School, and because of the housing crisis, she sleeps on the couch. so that her son can have his own room. Other stories people have shared are just sort of regarding the very long commutes that they have, maybe, 2 or 3 hours each way to get to work. And a lot of them are not just commuting with themselves, they actually have young children. So if you can imagine, picking up a kid, let's say, taking them from Santa Cruz, dropping them off at childcare, maybe in Mountain View, and then driving to Palo Alto to teach, and then doing that, again on the way home. So I think that the universal message really about the teacher housing crisis and the housing crisis for the missing middle is how difficult it is to have an inclusive community right now because of the high price of housing, and how this is really affecting us as community members and affecting our children. And all of these stories can be replicated to other forms of missing middle workers, like police dispatchers, social workers, caregivers, nursing assistants. Most of these people share the same stories. So from my perspective, I think it's really important to hear these stories, because I think that it's really shocking when you find out, how someone is living. And I think even there was a story recently on the news, I don't know if anyone saw it, about how at the Atherton Police Department, they have a room where the police officers sleep because most of them live over 2 hours away. So basically, they're going to like emergency situations. They may not have slept in 12 to 16 hours, and then they have to sleep in the police station before they drive home. So I just wanted to share that perspective with you. And I also wanted to say that there is a bit of hope on that level, because Supervisor Simitian has actually proposed a teacher housing project in Palo Alto. And the idea is to take a vacant or underutilized piece of land and then use that for teacher housing or workforce housing. And this project, I feel like, is really a game changer, and we've got to get the community out there to support it, because if Supervisor Simitian can get this project done in Palo Alto, we could replicate it throughout the county. He's already managed to get $6 million in funds from the county, which is really critical, and it's also going to involve 5 different school districts, so he's taking sort of a regional approach, which I think is very important, because we all know how expensive it is to build housing. So I think we need to tackle this problem as a region. So I think my 10 minutes is probably up, but
No, you have a couple more.
I have a couple of minutes, okay. So I guess the main thing that the two things that I see from a personal perspective, I think housing and, housing for everyone and decent housing is sort of the backbone of a community. So I think it's something that we all have to work on together. It's not just about the teachers, it's about the parents, the community members, the police officers, the firefighters, the high-tech workers, everyone. So I think we all have to get together and try to solve these problems. But then I also think it's really important that we support Supervisor Simitian's project and other projects like this, because they could really serve as a model to move housing forward. And I think everyone here may know that only 1% of housing since 2015 in Santa Clara County has actually been built for that missing middle. Most of it, as Steve talked about, is for either lower income levels, or 88% of it is actually luxury housing. But 80% of the community actually is in that middle, yet only 1% of the housing is being built for them. So, you know, as a mother, as a parent, just as a community member, this is something that I think everyone needs to get involved and work on the solution. So if you have time, I encourage you to go to supportteacherhousing.org. You don't have to be a teacher. You could sign up as a supporter. But if we could all just work together, everyone on the panel and everyone that's here, we can tackle this problem and we can solve it, because it's really about being persistent and, you know, overcoming obstacles, which I know we can do as a community. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your vision and your inspiration. You inspire us to action. Thank you. So next, Denise Pinkston. We're very lucky to have Denise with us today. Can you hear me? Am I doing this all right? Okay. Denise has 30 years of experience in real estate, planning, and project management. She is the production committee moderator and Bay Area Council representative, big titles, to the committee to house the Bay Area, CASA. She's a partner at TMG Partners and is current East Bay Zoning Board member and a former County of Marin Planning Services coordinator. So, Denise, tell us about CASA and what you have learned about challenges and solutions for missing middle housing. And Denise has PowerPoint for us.
Yes, so thank you very much. I'm very heartened to see this many people coming out on a weeknight to talk about housing and how we need more of it. A lot of my titles up there are really volunteer titles, and I think what's beginning to change in the housing landscape is a number of us who are citizens who live in the Bay Area, who own our homes, we raised our kids here, are finding that the folks we need to make our communities a community can no longer live here. And if that doesn't make you want to step forward and try to take some leadership on this issue, I don't know what will. Hopefully this flicker's going to work now after all that. I'm pushing the wrong button. Next slide. There we go. So you are all familiar with the consequences of the housing crisis. Essentially, anyone who doesn't own a home or hasn't owned one for a long time is at risk of being displaced, facing what we're now calling the mega commute. It sounds so nice when we put a title around it. But what that means is commuting longer than 2 hours a day each way to get to work. And as you pointed out, it's not just teachers, it's our museum workers, our retail clerks, our police departments, our planners in local government. The people we need to make our communities function can no longer live in many of our communities. And Palo Alto is not alone. I live in Berkeley, and we face these exact issues. We cannot hire entry-level staff at the city. They keep leaving. We can't keep our school teachers in the school. They keep turning over. We have huge vacancies in jobs that are middle-income jobs because people can't afford to live in many Bay Area communities anymore. And it's really, to me, it's frightening as a mom and just as a citizen that that's what we've come to. Next slide. So some of the other, in addition to kind of gutting the middle class out of our communities, if we don't have the ability to house the people we need to have a community, not only do we threaten the vibrancy and life that we value in the Bay Area, but we threaten the economy of the state itself. And that means less tax money to go around to solve all of our problems and more companies leaving the Bay Area. The statistics shown below just shows annual surveys done by either the Bay Area Council Business Group or by CURB or some other organization about how many people are thinking of leaving the Bay Area. Well, in 2016, it was a third of the Bay Area was hoping to leave soon. Now, you would have thought that was a bad number. A year later, it was 40%. And in 2018, half of Bay Area residents plan to leave California. That's what survey results are showing, and it is particularly problematic in our young people, in our workforce, in our teachers, in the folks we need to keep those of us who are getting a little gray, happily living in the communities we call home. So the problem is serious, and it is causing an entire generation of Californians to find their lives in another state in the U.S. Next slide.
So tonight we're talking about one segment of the housing problem. We're talking about more segments at the Committee to House the Bay Area. But in particular, the problems we're now experiencing with sort of the missing middle housing are in part an artifact of the rules that we have created to govern the land use patterns of our communities. And many of those rules were created after World War I with the explicit intention to prevent people who didn't make a lot of money and couldn't afford a single family house, and some of those folks weren't white and wealthy, they were perhaps non-white and not as wealthy, they were intended to keep those folks out. And there now is very good documentation by researchers at UC Berkeley and UCLA that things like single family zoning, large minimum lot sizes, setback requirements became the mechanism for excluding normal people from many neighborhoods when other mechanisms like deed restrictions that said no Jews shall live here or no black people shall live here became declared unconstitutional. Well, people are creative, and so they came up with a workaround that is embedded in the legal structure that we honor today. And I have to feel, I went to planning school. I got my degree in planning, and when I went out and got my first job, I thought I was saving the sanctity of neighborhoods. I was really passionate about being a public servant and saving neighborhoods. And now 30 years later, I feel like we missed the boat. Collectively, everyone in this room who's a homeowner is making a boatload of money from sitting in their home doing not very much. And our kids and our teachers are paying half their incomes to live anywhere near their job, and they have no hope of ever owning a home like the one we own. And to me, that's just wrong. So if what kind of society doesn't take care of its kids and its family members and its communities? I think our communities are at risk. So our zoning rules are right at the top of the list of things we need to start thinking about to house our missing middle. We need to undo that history of exclusion. What does that mean? It doesn't mean tearing everything down and putting in 8-story buildings. It means allowing the housing types that existed before our zoning rules did, like secondary units, maybe in the backyard, or allowing a big single-family home to be converted into 2 homes. Your home is 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. A family could very happily live in half that or a third of that, and that home could be divided into 2 units. But zoning doesn't allow that to occur today. So we need to start thinking about housing policies that don't destroy our neighborhoods, but bring back the vibrancy that we value in them by being inclusive once again. Next slide. These are examples of housing forms that were built prior to most zoning rules. These are East Bay examples because I live there, but could not be built today. So the first example is a 4-unit building that today's zoning only allows 2 units. Same with the second example. A third example has 3 units in it, only allowed to have 2. All of those could be buildings that would fit nicely and seamlessly into what we think of as a single-family neighborhood. 2.5 stories, nice pitch on the roof, nice front porch, right? None of those seem scary or alien. And yet if you talk about increasing density, people tend to come a little unhinged over the topic. Next slide. So this is the problem that Steve described, that is the result of our zoning rules and just our land use and planning policies and housing finance policies, along with decades of relatively flat income growth and very high, steep increase in cost from a whole variety of sources. And this is a graphic that shows the missing middle. And those 2 blue diagrams at the end, that's where housing is being built in the Bay Area today. It's being built for folks who make well over median income, sometimes 200% of median income, and folks who make less than 80% of median income, the subsidized affordable units, which are very important, but only serve a segment of population. And you'll notice that red dot in the background that keeps growing into the part that there's no housing production in. That is a graphic that shows most people in the population today are looking for housing at a rent that isn't being built today. There's little new construction. All those folks have to move into existing housing somewhere as a result. So those folks are the ones causing gentrification in places that get very hot and bothered about new housing, like neighborhoods in Oakland or pretty much anywhere in the East Bay that is gentrifying. It's middle income folks who would perhaps prefer to live in a Palo Alto or a Berkeley, but they got priced out of those communities 10 years ago, and so they started moving to the next tier, and even farther out to places like Stockton and Lodi and Modesto and Tracy, where you get those 2-hour commutes. When I started my career, 120% of median income, for those of you who are housing wonks, that was middle income. You could build a building and sell it for people who made median income, and you could sell into the middle class or rent into the middle class. Today, to pay to put a new building in the air, you have to start your rents at 180% of median income and go up, depending on the community and the land costs and all the rest of the stuff in the development deal. So that is the math around why we aren't building new housing for folks in the missing middle. The buildings cost too much. And that's an artifact of our zoning rules and our building codes and our design requirements and everything else where we tend to think a really good expensive building is the only beautiful kind. We're kind of missing the small and beautiful notion in housing. Next slide. Keeps clicking through, sorry, these drop in. So this just shows you that housing gets built in a variety of product types. Okay, stop there. Oh, no, one more, sorry. Single family, no, oh well, I'll talk to it. So single family homes are the most cost effective. They're wood frame, they don't have elevators, they don't have a big old parking podium. The parking may be structured, but it's in a relatively low cost garage. They are, 2 to 3 stories by and large. ADA, if it's met at all, is met on the ground floor. They don't have expensive engineered systems. They don't have glass curtain walls, right? They're simple buildings. Townhomes and sort of attached products are in that same cost range. And today you can deliver a single family home, maybe not in Palo Alto, but in the Central Valley, you can buy a single family home for $300,000. They can be built and delivered at cost-effective prices today. You move into what we think of as infill housing, the big buildings, the mid-rises and the high-rises, and in order to build one of those buildings, you have to be able to rent it for about $4.50 a foot, which times 1,000 square feet is $4,500 a month in rent. How many people in here can afford $4,500 a month in rent? Not a lot. Most of us can't, and that's what we're forcing our kids and our teachers to do in order to get new housing. Next slide. Not all units are created equal. And in this dialogue, we're trying to think about, the engineered marvel that is the poster child for mid-rise urban infill is kind of like the Tesla. It's an engineering marvel. It has fire life safety systems that are automated and backup generators and, fancy curtain walls and green building standards. And it is very expensive to build. What we need more of are Beatles. We need low-cost housing that can be afforded by real people that doesn't cost as much to build. And it happens to be that more affordable, naturally affordable housing actually fits really well into the single-family neighborhoods that today exclude multifamily housing types. So there's kind of a beautiful moment where what we need, the lower-cost Beetle version of housing, can fit into our existing neighborhoods, which we're all very concerned about improving. We believe in architectural heritage, and we would like our open space. Those product types can fit. Next slide. So this is just an example of, 90 units to the acre. Oh my God, that sounds really dense. Well, that building there is 90 units to the acre. It's 2.5 stories tall. It's got smallish units, and it doesn't have any structured parking. People park on the public street. That's a way to build super cost-effective, dense infill housing that could fit in many neighborhoods. And I've started to say, they mentioned I'm on the zoning board, I'm on the Berkeley zoning board, and I've started saying, hey, we need housing for people, not cars. And if we reduce some parking here and there to get more housing for people and less housing for cars, personally, I'm okay with that because I'd rather house the people. I think we need to start being comfortable saying that in local government because parking is expensive to put in a building. It does not need its own house. The houses need to be for the people, and it'll be more cost effective if you don't try to put the car in there too. Next slide. So CASA, the Committee to House the Bay Area, is essentially the dialogue you were advocating. People working across industry silos that tend not to work together or talk to each other very often. And we've been seated around a table. There are many of us in the room, affordable housing folks, market rate housing folks, a burgeoning missing middle advocacy group that isn't very well organized yet, but we're going to get there thanks to Steve. And with unions and environmentalists, and we're all trying to come together in a moment where we say we are in one heck of a pickle in the Bay Area. This is the worst housing crisis any of us have ever experienced, and it does not show any signs of getting very much better anytime soon. So we need to take some big, bold actions as a region, maybe declare a housing emergency and start changing some of the rules that are preventing people from solving the problems in their own communities. So at CASA, one of the solution sets for missing middle housing is to acknowledge that missing middle housing can't really be treated like a Tesla. You can't fee it to death. You can't charge a $100,000 impact fee on a small infill project and expect to get very many of them. And there are cities in the Bay Area who charge $100,000 per home in impact fees. To allow affordable units when they're required to be for the missing middle, rather than always low, very low. Give us a range so that the more market rate builders can actually achieve some on-site affordability. Allow small multifamily projects, duplexes, triplexes, quads, ADUs, to get exceptions and waivers from some of these fees so that we can get more of them. Let's make them more cost effective in order to try and encourage more middle income housing. And essentially what all of those are arguing for is allow a missing middle density bonus. The state has a state density bonus program where you get more density, but only for highly affordable units. Well, maybe we need to rethink that. New day, new problem, new solution. Let's make the density bonus work for missing middle product types too. Next slide. And then the next one is to try and create some carrots and sticks to encourage cities to revisit their single family zones. Give them money to do some new planning, to identify for themselves places where you could add duplexes, triplexes, and quads. For example, in Portland, they rezoned, they have a housing crisis up there too, and they rezoned every corner lot in their core single family neighborhoods for quads. Every single family lot. And they reduced their minimum lot sizes from 10,000 to 7,000 down to 5,000 and 4,000 square feet, so that what was just a one house site can now be a 2 or 3 house site. So there are changes you can make to your zoning that are small and gradual that allow this kind of gentle infill to occur to accommodate more people. Require cities to go back and take a close look at the single family zones, which we have, up till now, really, we put those in amber. We've said we are never going to change. It is going to always look tomorrow like it looks today, and I think we need to rethink that. So create some incentives for cities to go back. That's hard work. Neighbors are not going to be real happy when they think about a quad going in next door. But it's important work because it allows this gentle infill to happen in a way that can help support a variety of incomes in every neighborhood. And then, add a missing middle category to our regional housing needs assessment. So cities are not just assessed based on low and very low income housing production, but also on moderate missing middle income housing production. Another thing we haven't talked about here, we talked about it at a prior meeting, are more accessory dwelling units. And I know Palo Alto's talked about that. Many cities on the peninsula have talked about it. State laws are changing to require the issuance of building permits for accessory dwelling units so that they don't get caught up in neighbor veto wars. But in any case, those are some of the ideas that are being discussed at CASA that will allow building and site owners to build more missing middle housing. I think I exceeded my 10 minutes, I apologize.
Thank you, Denise. That's a whole lot of ideas for us to bring to our decision makers. Let's start doing it. Let's start thinking. Hear about those, Liz? The great ideas. Thank you. Lisa Ratner is our next speaker, and Lisa has a few more ideas that we can bring into the mix to help the missing middle. Lisa is an attorney, and she's a member of the Santa Clara County League of Women Voters Housing Committee, and that committee is pursuing a research project into how other communities have dealt with the disappearance of middle-income housing. Lisa's on the boards of the League of Palo Alto and Palo Alto Housing, which is a nonprofit housing developer which develops traditional multifamily rental housing for low and moderate income housing in the Bay Area. So Lisa, tell us about your research into some solutions to providing housing for the missing middle, such as shared equity housing, using limited equity cooperatives, community land trusts, and deed restricted housing.
Okay, thanks, Vine. Yes, our study project has found that communities in the past have successfully used the shared equity model to provide middle-income housing. Now, what is shared equity? Most people are familiar with the traditional model of homeownership. You own the land and the house, and
Excuse me, that's not the right.
that's not the right slide. Let's see, where's the,
Oh, here.
oh, yeah. Oh,
That's the right slide.
there we go. The,
It's a happily housed individual.
oh, okay. All right, well, I can, yeah, okay, there we go. Most people are familiar with the traditional model of homeownership, where you own the land and the house, and there's no restrictions on the resale price or to whom you can sell. Shared equity housing provides a different model. In limited equity co-ops, a corporation owns the land and the home, while the shareholder is granted the right to occupy the home by purchasing a share in the co-op. In a community land trust, the CLT owns the land underneath the home and rents the land to the homeowner, who only owns the home. In deed-restricted housing, the homeowner receives a deed to the land and the house, but her right to resell is restricted. These models are called shared equity housing because the owner shares the equity on resale with the community, which usually has subsidized the project, and the subsidy is recycled for future generations of homeowners. These non-market models have been used to create more than 450,000 affordable homes, particularly in New York, but also in other states and countries. All three models incorporate certain common policies. First, they restrict the amount of money the homeowner can make on resale. Second, they make the homes available for purchase only to households with low or moderate incomes. 3, they require the homes to be owner-occupied. And 4, they involve a third-party steward, such as a co-op, a community land trust, or a nonprofit, which acts as an educator and a financial backstop with the right to enforce the occupancy, income, and maintenance requirements. When these policies are permanent, they preserve moderate income housing for future generations. These non-market models also build wealth for individuals and the community, have lower foreclosure rates than traditional homes. Shared equity models survived the 1930s Great Depression and the 2008 Great Recession. They provide longer tenure and greater economic and social mobility than other models. Owners are able to sell their shared equity homes and move to other housing of their choice. Children living in shared equity households have higher educational achievement than children in families living in rental housing or in traditional homes, where families may face huge financial pressures and uncertain tenure. A closer look at limited equity housing and how I got involved. So how does it work? I wonder if the next slide, there we go. Yeah, next slide, I think. There should be a separate slide for co-ops. There we go. Okay. With co-ops, the co-op obtains a blanket mortgage that covers the entire development. The mortgage is serviced by the members' pooled monthly charges. This lessens the financial risk to lenders and members because the cost of the mortgage and maintenance are shared rather than burdening a single household. On resale, restrictions in the share agreement limit the shareholder receiving what she paid for the share, plus amortization of the mortgage attributable to her unit, plus capital improvements. And different co-ops use slightly different resale formulas. The residents manage the co-op through a board of directors. Membership is open to anyone who meets the income requirements. About 5 years ago, I stumbled upon the existence of limited equity co-ops when I first visited my mother's childhood home, the Amalgamated Apartments in Bronx, New York. Across from a large city park near the Bronx Botanical Gardens stand a number of 11-story, beautifully manicured, Tudor-style apartment buildings surrounded by bountiful gardens, walkways, and greenery. These are the Amalgamated Apartments. The original cooperators, members of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union, received financing from a low-interest loan made by the Amalgamated Bank and also the Jewish National Fund. Individual share contributions were also financed 50% by the bank. The New York State Housing Act of 1927 provided property tax relief. Today, the Amalgamated houses 1,700 families of low to moderate income with a waiting list of 5 years. It costs between $20,000 and $40,000 to buy into the co-op, with a flat monthly maintenance fee of between $400 and $600 a month. Households with incomes between $20,000 and $212,000 a year are eligible to become residents. Truly housing with a diversity of incomes. Now, New York City created more than 450,000 units of low and moderate income homes using limited equity co-ops in the period 1955 to 73. These co-op homes are financed by federal mortgage insurance, below market rate construction loans, some as low as 1%, state property tax exemptions, and by a state guaranteed 6% rate of return to private developers, in exchange for an agreement to make the housing affordable by imposing resale restrictions and income requirements. These owner-occupied limited equity co-ops had much lower defaults than any other HUD housing program. Closer to home, Dos Pinos is a privately financed limited equity co-op in Davis, California, providing homes for 60 moderate income households. The developer established this limited equity co-op as a condition for approval of a separate mixed-use development under inclusionary zoning rules. Let's take a closer look at community land trusts. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Deed restricted, one before that, I guess. Community land trusts. There we go, okay. Community Land Trust is a nonprofit community-based organization whose purpose is to ensure long-term housing affordability. The trust acquires the land and owns it permanently. An individual enters into a 99-year lease with the trust for the land, usually at a nominal fee, but purchases a home located on the land. The deed and the lease restrict the resale price and to whom the home can be resold. The homeowner, buffered from property tax increases as well as the cost of land, has a lower financial risk than conventional market-based housing. Foreclosure rates are 90% less than conventional mortgages. Stanford faculty housing is somewhat analogous, with Stanford acting as the land trust. The CLTs enforce the resale restrictions, occupancy, and maintenance obligations. They're notified if the homeowner is in danger of default. They provide homeowners with financial education and sponsor community building activities. Residents often make up 1/3 of CLT boards. In 1985, Burlington, Vermont faced rising rents, pricing out middle-income households. Housing advocates promoted two solutions: rent control or community land trusts. The city established the Burlington Community Land Trust, not rent control, which created several thousand permanently affordable homes. Today, the trust is the largest CLT in the U.S., with a portfolio including apartments, single-family homes, condos, and limited equity co-ops for low and moderate income households. And the housing trust itself has the right to purchase inclusionary housing units when they become available for resale. Let's take a closer look at deed-restricted housing. Here we go. So below market rate, or BMR housing, requires a market rate developer to build a percentage of market rate housing affordable to a target income. The owner's deed or mortgage includes resale price and income eligibility restrictions and owner occupancy and maintenance requirements. And these restrictions generally last only as long as the mortgage. Unlike co-ops or CLTs, there is no built-in community oversight if the homeowner runs into financial problems. Resale restrictions themselves may be difficult to enforce. Often a nonprofit will administer the program. Resale price formulas vary. Some require the resale price to be no greater than the rise in area median income. Some use a market appraisal approach, and still others base the maximum price on the size of the mortgage an income qualified person could afford. Some BMR owners struggle to afford maintenance, homeowners' fees, or individual capital improvements. These financial strains are often alleviated when a community steward, such as a co-op or a CLT, is involved. Deed restrictions, however, are easier than co-ops and CLTs to set up and much more easily understood by lenders. And they are the fastest growing method of creating housing affordable to those who would otherwise be priced out. But the small number of deed restricted homes created using our inclusionary housing compared to the hundreds of thousands of affordable homes created using co-ops is striking to me. Some policy recommendations, which are my own thoughts and are not endorsed by the League of Women Voters, although at some point they might be. Because we haven't finished our study project yet. Shared equity models have created over 450,000 affordable low and middle income homes in the US and thousands more in Canada and Europe. They usually were built with a subsidy. Federal or state below market mortgages, federally insured mortgage programs, guaranteed rate of return, property tax relief, donation of land, or as a result of inclusionary zoning requirements. Some projects used private philanthropy and loans from community-minded banks, such as the Amalgamated. Policymakers in our community should consider a shared equity model as opposed to a rental or a traditional homeownership model, especially when subsidies, such as a donation of public land, are used. Preserving that subsidy over repeated resales for later generations should be a key public policy goal. Contrasted with traditional homeownership or rental housing, shared equity housing builds individual and community wealth and encourages economic and social mobility, as well as better educational and financial outcomes for homeowners. So where to obtain the land for LEC or CLT? Inclusionary zoning might be a source, as it happened in Davis, as well as donations of land. Homes in disrepair or in foreclosure could be converted to co-ops or become part of a CLT, a method used with success in New York City. CLTs can also lease land to limited equity co-ops, a method used in Washington, D.C. Planners considering how to develop places like Valco, North Bayshore, the Fry's parcel in Palo Alto, Facebook's development in Menlo Park, and the county's proposed teacher housing site should consider using shared equity housing as one tool in their toolbox. Private philanthropies seeking ways to solve the middle income housing shortage and union pension funds could also help finance the creation of shared equity housing, as was done in 1927, when the oldest existing limited equity cooperative was established.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really important. We add that to our toolbox of changing the zoning. We may be on our way to help solve this crisis. Our last speaker is Elaine Wang, the Palo Alto-based architect, housing and bike advocate, and a community organizer, because she helped co-found Palo Alto Forward. As an architect and design thinker, she obsesses over how the built environment can be improved. And as co-founder of Palo Alto Forward, she has organized over 30 educational events on topics such as missing middle housing, affordable housing 101, taming traffic, and the Dutch cycling embassy.
That's a good one.
Which we should not talk about tonight. Elaine, tell us about the barriers and solutions for missing middle housing in places like Palo Alto.
Sure. So my presentation is actually going to parallel Denise's quite a bit, but it's going to be much more Palo Alto specific. I'm actually really grateful that all of you have shared all of your thoughts. One thing that I find really interesting is that there are a lot of ideas from the 1920s, and I'm thinking the 2020s should really parallel what we did in the 1920s. I would love to Denise touched on this, but I'm just going to go through a couple of really quick examples. And with all due respect to any large-scale developers out there, I actually think that one of the missed opportunities is the small-time developer and the role that they can play in developing the missing middle housing typologies for middle-income folks. So I'm going to throw a couple quick examples. This is my house. Isn't it cute? It's an 1891 special, and it's illegal. And why is it illegal? Whoop. Why is it illegal? Well, all kinds of things. You know, the front setback is too small, the side setback is too short, it doesn't meet any of the parking requirements today. You know, and I've got some numbers down there. It's about, at 3,000 square feet, it's a substandard lot for a residence in Palo Alto. But the 3,000 square feet, that's about 1/15 of an acre, or translated to 15 acres a unit. That's a moderate density. It's twice the single-family residential density, but it's actually pretty comfortable. This duplex is illegal, and why is it illegal? It's got 2 units, and it's really only allowed to have 1 on that site. The front setback is about 10 feet, not 20. Their side setbacks are like 3 feet or 1 feet on one side instead of 6, and there's no parking at all. Now note the year that it was constructed, 1926. And this unit, with 2 units on a 2,200 square foot lot. 2,200 square foot lot, not the house, 2,200 square foot lot. That's 40 units an acre. Does that sound crazy dense to you? Does it look crazy dense to you? Next one, triplex. Now all of these examples exist in Palo Alto today. These are all images around town. You can go out and you'll find them, it's everywhere. This triplex is illegal because it's got 3 units, where only 2 are allowed. It doesn't meet the covered parking standards. I think it's supposed to be 1.25 or 1.5 parking spaces per unit. The side setbacks are too narrow. There are all kinds of reasons, right? Constructed, 1924. It's a 7,500 square foot lot. That's actually really big, 1/6 of an acre. And it's got a density of about 18 units an acre. Now this next one, next. Back. Okay, quadplex, gorgeous quadplex. It's illegal, why is it illegal? It's got 4 units and only 3 are, go back. Yeah, it says 4 units, and only 3 are currently allowed on this particular site. There's 4 parking spaces and the zoning should require 6. Everything, all the setbacks are all wrong. It's, again, what year is it constructed in? 1921. It's 4 units on a 5,600 square foot site. And that's a density of about 32 units per acre. Is that crazy dense? Kind of looks cute to me. And down the street is this wonderful 6-plex. It's got 6 units, got the 6 mailboxes, got the 6 doors. Why is it illegal? Come on, guys. No parking. Too many units, no parking. Okay, you got it. And whoop, go back. Sorry. Go back. Okay. I just wanted to have, again, oops, sorry. So this one's a little bit later. It's a later vintage, 1938. It's on a less than 5,000 square foot site. It's got 6 units, and when you calculate that density out, that's 54 units an acre. Oh my God, is this a dense monster? It's not. It's basically a cute house that's carved up into 6 studio apartments. Next one, sorry. So this mansion apartment, I love this term, the mansion apartment. They're actually 2 identical mansion apartments on Cowper Street, right next door to a single family house that's about the same size. But this one has about 7 units, I believe, and only 3 are allowed. There's only 2 parking spaces in the back. It's probably about the same size as a single family house next door, but it's got 7 units. And on a 5,600 square foot lot, it's got a density of 56 units an acre. I mean, we use all the wrong regulatory frameworks to restrict what we can build and what we can't build. And this wasn't even built in the 20s. This was built in 1903. And so missing middle housing is really all around us. It is the traditional way that communities grew and accommodated housing. It's all over in every pretty much pre-war, World War II city. And it's fabulous. We already have a lot of missing middle housing. But most, oh my gosh, the formatting. Most were built before 1940, like I said, you know, the duplexes, the conversions, the triplexes, the cottage clusters. And today, it's all illegal to build new. I'm an architect. I got into architecture because I wanted to help build housing for people and make good communities. I get requests frequently, you know, well, I want to add another studio to this, you know, multifamily unit. I want to create a multi-generational compound. And I have to tell all of them, it's illegal. We can't do that in Palo Alto today. But this shouldn't be the case. So, but wait, right? Repeat after me. Duplex, quadplex, sixplex, 8.
Aren't middle housing?
Middle housing types great? Sorry, I stole that from Twitter. I thought that was great. So what happened? Now, this problem is at least 40 years old. And I mean, I'm just really appalled to say 1978 was just a banner year for setting up disaster. You had Prop 13, and here in Palo Alto, that's when most of our parcels were downzoned. So all of the missing middle housing that you saw, all the examples that I just showed were downzoned and grandfathered in back in 1978. What year is it today? It's 2018. It's been 40 freaking years. I mean, the zoning code is older than I am. And that's a generation and a half of housing that has not been allowed. We've just not allowed it. And this has just made our housing shortage that much worse. So what do we do? Well, it's not to say that missing middle housing, and I'll go through this really quickly, but I just want to show you a couple of examples of missing middle housing that have been built since 1978. All of them were quote-unquote illegal, so they required special permission. These are more examples. These are townhomes built in 1980. They required a PC, 7 units on a 14,000 square foot lot. It's not super dense. It's definitely not as dense as some of the other examples. These homes were built in 1996. They required another PC. They're lively. They're, you know, 22 homes with a bunch of ADUs, and it's great. But again, they were illegal, so they required special permission. They needed a PC. And now, because of the rules, we're at a place where land values are so high, and it's really hard to get those special permissions. So we're in danger of losing housing stock. These cottage clusters and cottage terrace, somebody sent me a proposal that they saw in the neighborhood for a single family lot. These two 3,000 square foot lots are now considered one lot, one standard single family size lot. And the owner bought it, and you know, really what's there is illegal, and the only legal thing he could build on it is a single family house. I mean, that's how insane our rules are. This is what's happening. I actually looked at this property about 5 years ago, 7,500 square foot lot, like 2 blocks from University Avenue, about like 3/4 of a mile from the Caltrain station. There were 2 cute houses. Well, the owner bought it, and they tore it down, and they built one really, really big house. I mean, it's a gorgeous house, but just think about all of the units that could have been there. On a lot, 7,500 square foot lot, within spitting distance of downtown University Ave, Palo Alto, and the train station. It's a lost opportunity. We have so many of these lost opportunities every day. So what do we do? Well actually, first question, where should missing middle housing go? I don't think it needs to go everywhere. We certainly could look at, you know, rezoning every single R1 neighborhood, but we should just put it where it was before, where it is now. And these are most of the neighborhoods where if you just walk around, you think you're seeing a single family house. But they're not single family houses. And they often have more units than you think they do, and they have much greater densities in terms of units per acre than you think they do. So if we want this, we gotta do 2 things. Legalize it, and that means we have to change the zoning. And I know this is kind of almost political anathema on the third rail, but we really, really have to change the rules. So the 4 big things that I personally would emphasize. You have to increase square footage for missing middle housing types. A standard single family lot, you can build about 1/3 of the square, so if you've got a 7,500 square foot lot, you can build a house that's about 1/3 the size of that lot. That's called floor area ratio, about 1/3, 0.03 FAR. So 7,500 square foot lot, you can build maybe like a 2,500 square foot house, roughly. It's a little more complicated than that. But most of the missing middle housing that we see have much more square footage than that. So a 7,500 square foot lot usually accommodated about 5,000 square feet of house. Next one. You got to change the density limits as we saw earlier. So instead of, right now the max density we can do is about 50 units per acre in Palo Alto, and that's basically along the commercial corridors. That's not even in the locations where missing middle housing exists. So instead of 15 units per acre, 30 units per acre, we either have to increase that to 50, 60, 80, or just get rid of this idea of a density limit. Most cities don't use the square footage or floor area ratio and the density limits to restrict housing. We do both, and it's really hamstringing our ability to build anything and to allow the small-time developer or just the homeowner to, you know, retrofit their property so that they can accommodate more housing and different housing types. I'd also encourage height flexibility. Substandard lots in particular, or smaller lots in particular, are subject to much more stringent height standards. There's no reason, and if you walk around the neighborhoods, you will see this. Substandard lots with 2-story buildings. Right now, you're only allowed to build one. And then there are, Denise showed the 2.5-story structure, on one of her slides. And I think, allowing extra height for some flexibility can allow you to accommodate more units. Especially the bigger the lot, the more height you should be able to get. And then last, and this is really key, what's parking got to do with it? Everything. I mean, parking hamstrings all site planning. It hamstrings our ability. We got to build the housing for the people, not the cars, right? And so there's a couple of things rolled into that. So many of potential changes. I don't have to bore you with everything, but these are just some things to think about. Maybe we do offer that density bonus or that square footage bonus if you can do a missing middle project, you get extra square footage. The bigger the lot, maybe the bigger the proportion of square footage you can build. I don't think you should be able to build, 3,000 square feet on a 3,000 square foot lot, but certainly you should be able to build, 5,000 square feet or 6,000 square feet on a 7,500 square foot lot. The bigger the lot you have, the more square footage and flexibility you have in order to accommodate different configurations of house. Again, change the density limits. That's huge, and I think we can think about different ways to do it. You either get rid of the number of units per acre, or you say, well, this is a 3,000 square foot lot, you can allow 2 units. This is a 5,000 square foot lot, you can allow up to 4. Let's think about these in different terms, not just the standard units per acre designation we've been locked into for the last 40 years. Allowing height, I've already kind of mentioned this. I think greater height on larger lots gives us more flexibility, and obviously 2 stories on substandard lots, it was good enough in 1920, I don't see why we can't do that in 2020. And then lastly, the parking restrictions. Right-sizing parking I think is really important. There was a parking study that came out recently that said, about 0.75 parking spaces per unit is what people are actually utilizing in our city, especially in amenity-rich neighborhoods. I think right now, it's something like 1.25 parking spaces for every 1 bedroom, 1.5 parking spaces for every 2 bedroom. I mean, you're asking people to build a lot more parking than we actually need, and in 5 years, we're going to see a transportation revolution where people aren't really going to own private automobiles. So I saw some reactions out there. And I would also encourage us to allow parking in areas where we currently don't allow parking. So everybody parks their car in their driveway, in the front setback, but technically that's not a legal parking space in Palo Alto. And I think we should think about not counting that parking space towards our square footage. Gotta build for the people, not for the cars. Okay, cool. Oh. Sorry, Justine's out there. That's for you, Justine. I'll come back to that. Okay, so I just want to show, again, I just want to end on a couple of examples, and I know I overstayed my welcome, but isn't this cute? This is an LA fourplex. My brother-in-law and his wife and their beautiful little baby, who's just born, they live in this fourplex. This is where they call home. It's 4 units, 5,600 square foot house, on a 7,500 square foot lot with 4 car garages in the back. I mean, it's got a wonderful scale. The units are lovely. They're all 2 bedroom, 2 bath with a big kitchen and a living room. It's very gracious, and every unit is the same. And this is from 1927. I mean, they really did things right. And but we haven't been able to do any of this for the last 40 years. Definitely not here in Palo Alto, and probably not in LA. And then this. So, Justine, are you here still? I always think of you when I see this project. So Justine had this wonderful idea a few years ago, well, it's like 5 years now, where she wanted to pull together with a bunch of families and build a compound with 3 small townhomes and, you know, do that within spitting distance of downtown Palo Alto. But, you know, she knows it's illegal. You can't do that. And this is an example from Boulder where they did exactly that. It's a 9,800 square foot lot, and they're allowed to build 4,900 square feet of house, so it's a 0.5 FAR. And I mean, it's wonderful. It's 1,500 square foot units. They're just gorgeous. So I think we have really good examples. We should be realizing them. And I guess I'll just, you know, repeat after me. And here. Duplex, quadplex, sixplex, 8. Legalizing middle housing is great. Thanks.
Thanks, Elaine. That was, you know, I want to see Palo Alto change soon. Steve, you wanted to say something, and then after Steve says something, I'm going to walk around with the mic and see if you have questions, okay?
The missing middle has almost no advocates.
The mic's not on.
That's why Liz, who lives in a nice house, has made it a priority. For Bonnie and for Nancy and I, we need the people who have homes and are not struggling to come out and stand up for this group and come to council, because it really is about us. Sarah left out one part, which is when it's hard to hire a teacher, or it's hard to hire a nurse, or a firefighter, or an EMT, because they can't afford to live here, they suffer the most, but we lose their services. And what the school administrators said as a metaphor for what the hospitals and the police departments would say is it's really getting hard to hire. So we who have housing need to take on the missing middle as our priority for them, but also for us.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to our panelists, but I'm sure there's many of you who have questions, so I'm going to walk around with the mic and hear your questions. This lady, and then I'll come back to you.
You guys keep talking about moderate housing. Could you define what you consider that household income to be?
So on that big blue graph, the barbell graph that I had, missing middle, what we're not building, is between 100% of area median income, so that's about $100,000 a year, and 200% of area median income, or $200,000 a year. So, so that's household income. So it could be 2 household members, it could be 2 teachers making each $50,000 a year, for example. So it's in that range, and it, you know, varies.
Can I comment on that? So technically, what Denise is saying is absolutely correct. However, because of the financing mechanisms of low-income housing, that gap really starts at about $60,000 a year, which is not technically missing middle housing. However, the sweet spot to develop and pencil out an affordable housing project is about an income level of $55,000 to $60,000 a year. So the gap in housing is really starts at about $60,000 and goes up, you know, all the way to, I mean, daily it's, you know, it's even starting to go above $200,000 a year, but that's where it starts.
None of you have talked about basements as being a source of increasing density. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that.
So I didn't talk much about the state ADU laws, but in 2016 I worked on a bill that allows, requires cities to issue building permits so that homeowners can convert existing spaces like basements, garages, the pool house, into an accessory dwelling unit with a building permit, provided it can be made fire and life safe and certified by the local building official, with no additional off-street parking. So in the realm of sort of using your existing structure to its maximum effect, the ADU bill was the first state law that applied to the whole state of California that allows the beginning of missing middle housing in every neighborhood in every part of the state of California. And I'm hoping with these sorts of dialogues there'll be further discussions about how to do more things at the local level or regional level to encourage more better use of our homes, but that was really the first state step into this policy.
Yeah, but the, unfortunately, the other thing that you have to be aware of is that all land use is local, and in Palo Alto, there's been a strong push to discourage basement ADUs, and that was done effectively in our own ADU ordinance. And so, it's unfortunate because basements already have to comply with life safety requirements and basic building codes, light and air, ventilation, and all of those things. So to me, as you know, from a technical perspective, a basement ADU is no different than like a basement ADU with a bath, or a basement with a bedroom and a bathroom. However, I think we've officially put the kibosh on that here in Palo Alto.
Other cities allow them. Each city is different. Yeah. In the East Bay, a lot of ADUs are basement or partially submerged basements because they're just cheaper to build. The footage is already there.
Another question?
Hello, my name is Chris. I'm the founder of Teachers Deserve More Foundation. We actually help provide grants for teachers to buy homes and increase income for teachers as well through real estate. But one of the things I found in my research in looking for these shared equity, like for example, there's a company called Landed, which supposedly helps teachers buy houses, but really the problem is that it's in indie real estate. I'm a teacher in Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh High School, and I'm also a real estate agent that works with a company that helps build these housing complex for teachers. We actually just got one approved in Pittsburgh, which is it's going to give housing for teachers in the district for a discounted like 20% less than actual market cost. So that's good. That actually increases income in a certain indirect way, right? But the thing that I noticed, like for example, with Landed, because I was excited to hear about it, especially with my heart to help teachers, being one and not being able to afford a house. I was really disappointed with their business model because I would imagine with any shared equity, somebody wants to profit, and that's why for example with me, I started a nonprofit because I figure as long as you're trying to profit, it's not going to be good news. And so what I'm curious about, because I don't know too much about shared equity, I think it was you that went through that, is how benevolent is it? And I understand business is business, I understand that, but that in these cases, as you mentioned across the country, are people really like offering at an extremely low percentage, or is it still they're kind of taking a big chunk out of any sort of equity?
Yeah, so I'm not really familiar with Landed, but I don't think it's the kind of limited equity model that I was talking about at all. And you really need these 4 mechanisms in your shared equity program in order to preserve housing at an affordable level. First, you need to restrict the amount of money the homeowner can make on resale. Now, different co-ops have different rules about that. Some say you can only get back what you put in plus your portion of the amortization plus maybe your capital improvements, and that's it. Other communities say, no, we'll let you get back what the percentage of the raise in the AMI is, the average median income, and we'll add that to your equity share. Still others will look at the raise in the income of the target group that they're trying to house. They'll say, oh, teachers received a 5% salary raise in the past 5 years. You're entitled to, in order to continue to house teachers, you're then entitled to get 5% more of the equity you put in. So it depends. But you really need to have these permanently enacted agreements to limit the amount of money the homeowner can make. You also need to make, in your agreement, the homes available for purchase only to households of the target group you're trying to help. You have to require, in the models that I'm talking about, that that the homes be owner occupied because it changes the behavior of the people who are in the homes. In other words, subletting wouldn't be allowed. And it really helps to have a third-party steward like a land trust or a limited equity co-op to be there to backstop these folks who might get into financial trouble, need homeowner education, and help build the community. So these methods, the methods I'm talking about, do not allow people to make a lot of money. And the reason is, but they do build wealth. They build individual wealth, especially compared to rental housing. And they build community wealth. And why is it called shared equity? Because you're sharing the equity with the community that made it possible to build the housing.
Hi, I'm here to ask, I came in late, so I'm not sure if this is covered. So this is about solutions that is coming up for middle housing, but what about the restrictions that you are thinking of for example, I've come across two people who own like 55 properties in the area. So that's like appalling to me for someone who's been trying to, get a home. So, and they have strategies to release their homes in a way that they can control the housing market. So what are the restrictions that, for example, some of the countries that I know outside, having more than one house, the second house, they're penalized, in several ways, so that can discourage them from having more than one house. So isn't restriction also important along with the solutions? I don't know how the laws work, but I don't know.
I think that if you have restrictions on the resale price or rental price of housing, that tends to come into the discussion around rent control.
Sure.
CASA is also talking about these sorts of price controls. The thing about it is that you have to have a very gentle hand, and particularly in the US where we have constitutional protections of property rights and so forth. We don't limit in the US how many properties any individual or company can own. That's sort of a fundamental American attitude about property rights in general. But CASA is talking about rent ceilings and anti-gouging policies so that investors who buy property for the sole purpose of controlling it for a long time and benefiting from the scarcity that is driving people out of the region will have that capped at some level, and the level CASA is talking about is a 10% annual anti-gouging cap. So you don't have someone raising the rent by a factor of 2, for example. So that's we weren't really set up tonight to talk about that, but obviously that's a hot topic this year, particularly with things like the repeal of Costa-Hawkins going on the ballot, which would allow rent control to apply to every property in the state, including people's single-family homes, which for a lot of folks is problematic. If you have to move for a year, then your mortgage may be twice what you're allowed to rent your house for. So.
My turn?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks very much. Excellent scenario and ideas. One of you mentioned about bold movement, bold action. I'm still hoping to hear that bold action. The issue really is housing, of course, but actually it's land, right? So we don't have enough land. How do we go ahead and find a methodology of actually creating land? That's the basic goal.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is we have plenty of land. There are 1.5 million single-family homes in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the 9-county Bay Area. If each one of those homes added a home, it became a duplex, that would be adding 1.5 million homes. That is so many more than any of us can conceive of producing, particularly how long it takes to do market rate housing, that existing neighborhoods can make an invaluable and significant contribution, but we have to change our rules. which is the bold part of this. I mean, when I first started saying we had to change single-family zoning, I was waiting for my neighbors to hate on me in the grocery store. A few of them have. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to say our rules have gotten us in the pickle we're in, and it's time to revisit them. So we can't invent land, unless you want to have floating houses or houseboats or something. And until that point, we have to make better use of the land we do have, which is right here in our existing neighborhoods in every community in the 9-county Bay Area.
Yeah. I mean, those of you who have questions, I'll get to you, don't worry.
Lynn wanted to say something.
Is there somebody else wants to, you want to answer that anyway?
It's okay. I mean, I think Denise has really hit it. The bold action, there isn't really a silver bullet, and the bold action has to be taken in each individual jurisdiction, because as I said earlier, all land use is local. So these are battles. I'm sorry, there's no, grand pill or magic wand we can wave, but we really have to change these rules in every single city up and down the peninsula, along in the Bay Area, because without doing that, we're just going to hamstring ourselves for the next 4 years.
One thing that people get confused about is they think if we build a lot of housing, that's going to induce growth. If you look at what's happened, most of the new housing we build are going to allow young people not to have to live with their parents forever. 5 roommates in a 2-bedroom house being able to find more space. Teachers living on a couch to find a home that has enough bedrooms for their family. We're talking about taking the pressure off of existing families who have had to crowd, move far away. Yeah, there will be some new people that come in to take the jobs, but most of what we're talking about now is redressing and resolving the shortage that has built up, caused gentrification, caused kids to live with their parents, caused long commutes.
I just wanted to add, besides single-family houses, which I mean is like the most common sense solution, there's actually a lot of vacant and underutilized public land out there. So my experience has been actually, it's not hard to get land. You can get land. It's hard to get the partnerships of, let's say, the public entity, whether it's the school district, the county, the city. You've got to get the city or the county, or whatever the public agency, the water district that has that land, and then you have to get the will of the planning department on your side. And then you have to get the financing in place. So I think the big problem is getting all those parties together to have the will to get it done. But if you can get all 3 of them together, there isn't an obstacle you can't overcome to get this housing built. So that's been my experience.
Hi, so thank all of you for all of this tonight. I live in one of those areas that you guys have the oval, where we have lots of duplexes and triplexes, and I'm actually adjacent to a 12-unit little cottage, and we love our neighborhood. We've been there, actually my husband's been there a very, very long time. So I'm curious what other cities have done, because Palo Alto right now hasn't done anything about it, which are 3 problems that we're having, which is one, what Elaine brought up, just around the corner from us, they are taking 2 lots that had 5 homes, and it's now being converted to 2 homes. So what have other cities done to stop that? Across the street from us is a unit that had a front house and 4 smaller homes. That was bought by Foreign Investment and now has sat empty for 2 years. And rumor has it it's being converted to a large single-family home. So what are we doing to, one, stop the ruining, really, of the character of our neighborhood, which is getting rid of those multi-family units and converting them to large single-family homes? What are we doing about the empty homes? We now have 3 on our block that have been sitting empty for several years. And then the last one is, we also had a problem where our rents went way up in our area. Now we do own our home, but we feel like we lost some of the interesting character when the rents were replaced by Airbnbs. And supposedly Palo Alto has some regulation on it, but we haven't seen any enforcement. So we lost our neighbors for Airbnbs, ghost homes, and now large mansions. So I'm curious to know what other cities have done that Palo Alto could maybe think about doing.
So there's some good examples around the country of cities that have grappled with this issue. I think this is a new issue in the Bay Area, frankly, and in a way we're behind. We like to think we're the head of everything in the Bay Area, but really we're really behind on this land use stuff. So the Cascadia region, which is Vancouver, Portland, Seattle, they have the mansionization problem. One of the things they did was to get rid of minimum lot sizes altogether in certain neighborhoods, and to have a maximum size house without going through a whole big headache. So the combination of these various regulatory changes can work together to encourage more smaller units and fewer giant units. Some cities, and obviously Airbnb is a completely new phenomenon, so there's no great national models and every city is grappling with it. San Francisco just required registration of anyone with an Airbnb, and then they went out and purged all the Airbnb lists. If you didn't show up on a registration list, the city enforced against you. And they did that by going through the Airbnb ads. Some cities are charging an Airbnb tax, like a hotel tax on the Airbnb. And that had the effect in San Francisco of bringing these things, making them legal, having them be regulated, and enabling the city to monitor them so that if they become a problem in certain building types, they're more able to tailor a regulatory approach. Some cities have vacant unit taxes to discourage foreign investors from buying homes and letting them sit idle for a long time.
Are you talking about Vancouver?
Vancouver does have a vacant unit tax. Yeah, London does. San Francisco's talked about it. So there are a whole list of ideas that come under this kind of housing production category that help keep the housing you have that is providing these middle-income housing types. It's especially important in a very high-income community.
Yeah, and I would say that there's a couple of other thoughts in terms of regulations to maintain existing number of units. I think that's something that's being broached here in Palo Alto. So if there's 5 units existing, and the example of the 5 units existing coming down to 2 units would not be legal, because then you have to maintain the 5 units. But all of these things, in order to happen, I cannot emphasize enough. It takes a lot. It takes the political will to do that, and we need to tell our electeds and to tell our officials that this is something that we need to see. We need the advocacy at the local level, at the local government level, in order to make these things happen. Otherwise, they will not happen. We can wish for them, but unless we're taking them, and Liz is gone, of course, Liz Nis. But
Adrian's still here.
Adrian's still here. Oh, Adrian. Hi, Adrian. But I mean, they need to know, and they're not always going to agree, but they need to know that there is a critical mass, and I don't just mean 1 or 2. They need to know there's a critical mass of people who are interested in these ideas.
Okay, I have a couple of comments first, and I have a couple of questions too. First of all, good news is that Santa Cruz County has a new program that's not in effect yet. They published it in January of 2017. It's a limited amnesty program to help with housing, which is for unpermitted property. So they're going to ease up on the restrictions and the code enforcement on those things, as long as they comply with certain safety issues and some other things that they might decide need to be done to help with the properties. I'm trying to find out now if that would apply to a buyer who took over that property, or would they suddenly have to then bring it up to compliance. I don't know the answer to that yet. That's hopeful, and I don't have word yet on when that will go into effect. I just emailed somebody from the county today to find out more about that and whether or not it would apply to a buyer. And then the other thing is that I think we need a certain kind of protection for some of these programs you're trying to put in place. So I'm all for them. My degree is in something similar, but I'm a real estate broker. I'm not in that field. Recently, well, no, actually it was a number of years ago now,
senior housing. There was some senior housing, I think it was in Los Gatos. And when the senior passed on, the children decided they're going to sue to take it out of senior housing and allow them to sell it to anyone, which then increased the prices. I know other real estate agents are going to hate me for saying this, but that sort of thing has to be stopped. Because, you know, you need to have protections in these programs you're setting up for the teachers and for the resale so they can stay in the program rather than have some lawsuit take it out. So there have to be strong protections for that sort of thing against people who just want to take a profit. And then I have two questions. Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. You had a program in Los Gatos that you were working on with the city of Los Gatos, a town, city, for teachers. And I was wondering what the status is on that, because I didn't hear you mention it tonight.
Well, the status is that the city of Los Gatos actually approved unanimously a teacher housing project in Los Gatos. So I'm going to be moving forward with that project. So it is, yes, come on everyone, clap. We have a positive movement. But the thing is, it is a small project. It's only 4 units, but it can serve as a model. A lot of communities are afraid of affordable housing. And I think, you know, I'm a very practical person, and I really believe in action. And so let's people say, oh, it's not big enough. No. I don't want to fight with people for 10 years about how big it is. I want to get it built and then let the community say, you know what, this is beautiful. Now there's more land. Let's build more teacher housing or workforce housing, etc. I think a large part of this problem is we have to take responsibility as a community, and instead of fighting with each other about what's big enough, good enough, this part, group, that part, whatever, let's all work together and support each other, the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the lawyers, I don't care who you are. Let's all work together to support the community and support more housing. So
I agree. We need to have our children exposed to our teachers in our neighborhoods, not just they live somewhere else, and our firefighters and all that. And one other question, there was an MCC program, and actually there's a special MCC program for teachers, mortgage credit certificate. It was actually a federal credit, a tax credit on part of the interest on your loans. Yes. And they actually set up a program for teachers too. Does that still exist and can be combined with anything you're doing?
So the county, and this stuff is like, you know, we have to have more research or whatever, but Santa Clara County had a mortgage credit program, which I think that they don't have anymore, is my understanding. But there were actually a lot of different programs for teachers and other workers that I think kind of, because of the Great Recession and budget crises, have disappeared. So I don't think we need to really reinvent the wheel. I think, like, Denise is doing a lot of good work and good research, and so is Lisa. There's a lot of programs that were effective in the past that we could maybe just reinstitute. So.
So many questions. My name is Renee, and I am actually hosting a tiny house festival this summer in San Jose, and I hear a lot about the ADUs, what's ADU compliant, what's not. We have some houses that'll be there that are. However, I don't hear, I think, enough talk about tiny houses as ADUs. People seem to be afraid of them being portable. However, I believe they provide, the home ownership to people that wouldn't otherwise have it, that would be renting. And then also that lowers the cost for the person that will have the ADU in their yard. Often the folks that need that extra income the most are ones that would have a challenging time getting a loan for something like that, the construction of a new home. They don't have to deal with all that construction work and contractors. Has anyone on this panel put that forward as something to work toward for people to have their own home?
We actually hosted a tiny house salon about 1.5 years ago. Very interested in the idea. I think again, a lot of the challenge in this is somewhat regulatory. I think one of the big pieces of resistance against tiny homes is just making sure that it's safe and sanitary. So if cities can put in place, you know, the very sort of light touch framework for how they hook up to water, electricity, and take care of sewage, you know, much like, say, an RV park or something like that. And I know it's been done in other cities, so we can look towards those examples. Then that would definitely help the ability for tiny houses to be placed on people's homes. There was a lovely couple who came and spoke at our last session. They built their own tiny house, and they were kind of storing it. They would never name where they were storing it. But, you know, I think in talking to their family and their neighbors, they understood that there was some fear and some resistance. They didn't want, you know, they didn't want to see, you know, 4 or 5 tiny homes camped out in you know, their neighbor's backyard. So I love the idea of the tiny house as a solution. I think it's an important one. You know, but again, the two pieces, the two biggest fears are the sort of sanitation issues, and then the, you know, the perception that there's an encampment. But all of those are obviously workable. They just need to happen and have big groups of people en masse advocating for them.
Yeah, again, in Cascadia, the state of Oregon created a small homes building code chapter that specifically allows tiny homes to be viewed as a legal building. In California, they tend to be regulated as an RV, as a vehicle. So the physical standards in a vehicle are different. You know, teeny tiny bathroom. Once you call that a house and you put it on a foundation, it doesn't meet any of the state building codes. So anyway, it's an important avenue for work. And if there becomes a missing middle housing advocacy group that is an outgrowth of some of these conversations, I think that is another avenue to pursue. I haven't personally done it because there's only so many hours in the day and I'm a little busy at the moment, but I think it's, you know, other states are doing it, and keep going. You know, don't stop. The policy will hopefully catch up.
I see a lot of eager hands going up, but Marson Foster said we have to be out of here by 9. So what I'm recommending, I know a lot of you want to ask a question, is that there'll be time to talk individually until they chase us out, especially around the food table, etc. But I want to thank everybody for your excellent questions.